Watergate scandal continues to grip the nation as the infamous 18.5-minute gap in the Nixon tape.
There was a tape.
Yeah, this tape was never subpoenaed. Why?
Nobody knows it exists.
Hi, Dan. Thanks very much for sorting me out with the interviews and things. I appreciate it.
Oh, sure. No, my pleasure, Howard. Thanks for helping.
So how are you doing? How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Yeah. Excited to be here.
So, I mean, first of all, congrats. I was reading when I was looking on the internet. I read that you won the Best Director award in Manchester, not far from where I was born. So, congratulations on that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just at the Manchester Film Festival like 2 months ago or so in March, I think, and had a fantastic time there. I was just there for a couple of days, but I won the Best Director prize, which was
Yeah,
it was great.
Because it's a very American movie, but I mean, you obviously, I know that I was reading the some of the interviews that you've done, and you wanted to make it not so timely Trumpian. You wanted it to kind of be a timely film, but not so timely that it would just kind of everyone would automatically think Trump. How did the UK audience kind of react after they'd seen it? Did you do a Q&A afterwards, and did they kind of relate to it in another way that you kind of didn't expect them to react?
Yeah, well, the interesting reaction was that a couple people said, "Oh, we kind of read Boris Johnson in this," because they're like, bumbling scandal where the cover-up's worse than the scandal, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this feels like Boris to us," So I thought that was really funny, but it speaks to the idea that sort of by you doing a historical, piece, everybody can kind of read their own way into it. The Brazilians thought, oh, it's like Bolsonaro. The Spaniards were, when we showed it in Spain, they're like, oh, this reminds us of Franco.
Yeah.
So and it was funny with the Manx, they definitely saw Boris Johnson in it. So
definitely. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the actual kind of the genesis for the film wasn't actually kind of the Watergate scandal. No, I think it was more the actual setting. I think you found kind of two settings that they were kind of hidden there, and they just kind of stayed in the same time era. No, they were stuck in their own era, and you just found those two, and that was the kind of the trigger, no, that made you
well, it was
create the film.
It was a little bit of both. I mean, literally the day I wrapped my last film was the day of the presidential election in November 2016. And then the next day I went out to see Jules Feiffer, who wrote Bernard and Huey, my last film. And he lives out on Shelter Island, which is at the tip of Long Island, outside of New York. And so inevitably the conversation kind of turned to Nixon and Watergate, because Feiffer had won a Pulitzer Prize for his political cartooning, largely about Nixon and Watergate. So we were just sort of chatting about those comparisons. And then that night I stayed with my friend Terry at the Silver Sands Motel, and which his grandparents had built in the 50s and 60s. And he had kind of preserved it as a vintage period motel. And, it's a working motel in the summer, but he rents it out for fashion shoots. Mainly. But he said, yeah, we're closed in the winter. If anyone, if you come up with an idea for a film, we can all, everyone can stay out here. The cast and crew can stay here. And then my writing partner, Daniel, had his aunt, coincidentally, worked at the Front Street Station Diner, which was just down the street from the motel. Right. And that was period. So exactly. Yeah. When the film gods give you two great locations, you make a movie,
Exactly. Yeah. And then obviously the actors Willa, for example, I was speaking to her yesterday. She's fantastic in the role. She just fits so perfectly. I don't know maybe it's the whole thing with the clothes and the hair and everything. But I mean, what was it about Willa that you saw that she was just going to be perfect for this role? Because it's just a perfect role for her, I thought.
Well, a big part of it is she's smart. She is she's academically smart. She went to Yale, I couldn't get in there. And, but she's also, trained as a theater actress. She's done a lot of plays. And she was recommended by a friend of mine, Lucky McKee, who had directed her. And, and Lucky's like, oh yeah, she's great to work with. And that, for me, that's a big part of it is, are they a nice person to work with? Can you work with them? And so she was kind of perfect for that. And she, you know, and she had enough of an interest in the history and the culture of the early 70s and what was feminism like in 1974 and where were the glass ceilings that someone like Connie you know, would be. And she did her research and brought a lot to that character in that context. So yeah, so she was great. And then John Magaro was recommended by Kelly Reichardt, you know, who I know, and she had just worked with him in First Cow, and she's like, well, he's great. And I was like, well, I'm going to trust Kelly Reichardt for sure, you know. So and then actually the couple people on the crew, the gaffer and the script supervisor, they're the ones who suggested Kathy Curtin, and because they'd worked with her, and I was like, if she was nice to the crew, I want her, you know. Yeah. Like that's how you can really tell. And I think actors sometimes forget, and agents forget, that as directors, we talk to everyone, you know. We get recommendations from not necessarily the most likely sources, but the most reliable ones. And then Vondie Curtis Hall, amazing. Richard Kind, I'd worked with on my last film. Bruce Campbell was someone I'd wanted to work with for a while, but this was our first time the schedules lined up that we could do something together. Same with John Cryer, who John I've known, you know, for 30 years, back when he was an indie filmmaker himself, you know, so we knew each other. And then Bruce got his buddy Ted Raimi, and it was like, all right, that's cool.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah. I mean, also, aside from the locations and the actors, the wardrobe is fascinating. I asked Willa about her outfit, and she said that you were very meticulous about the kind of the colors and like the clothes of each specific character. I mean, without giving too much away, the reasons why, how did you go with what? I mean, he's got this great big kipper tie, and then Willa's outfit is perfect. How did you decide on that? Why were you so kind of meticulous with it?
Well, part of it was we had a great costume designer, Sarah Kogan, and she collects vintage patterns. So, I mean, she collects vintage clothes, but also patterns. So she could make things from scratch. But the color design was very specific. And I will give this away because it doesn't really give away the movie, is that I wanted Willa and John, you know, Connie and Paul to be wearing blue. And beige, Willa's fingernails are blue. I wanted the older couple, Vondie Curtis Hall and Kathy Curtin's characters, Lena and Samuel, to be wearing red, and I wanted the hippies to be kind of in shades of yellow. Right. Now, on a low budget independent film, you don't always get exactly what you want, but more or less that was kind of what we had. Mm-hmm. So blue, red, and yellow are the three colors in the Wonder Bread logo.
Right. I was imagining the bread was going to come in here somewhere.
Yeah. And so that was it. You know, but it's something I've done on most of my films. I've had these kind of color schemes, you know, for the different teams, and it just helps the audience keep track.
To kind of pick things out and without even realizing it.
Yeah, it's just, and it's a very simple thing that's kind of budget neutral. Like, it doesn't cost any more to have a blue blazer than a red blazer, you know. So you may as well.
I believe Willa said that the dress was hand sewn now, so it took a little bit of time not to sort out.
Exactly. Yeah. No, Sarah is amazing, but also a little crazy. She sewed a lot of those outfits, and she would do them like in 24 hours. She'd stay up all night sewing these things. Mm-hmm. But God bless her, you know.
Worked out great. Yeah. And then obviously I want to talk about the relationship between the older couple and the younger couple. I don't want to give too much away because that's kind of like the main kind of central part of the film, but that is just there's a fantastic scene and fantastic relationship when they sit down at the table. And I think was it Robert Altman? You took a lot of kind of tips of Robert Altman, kind of overlapping the dialogues to make it as authentic as possible. And it's absolutely fantastic. That kind of 20-30 minutes is brilliant.
He was.
Explain a little bit why you decided to go with it, this overlapping, really authentic dialogue, and also why you decided to go with these two kind of World War II era and 70s era relationships, and kind of at loggerheads, if you will, with each other.
Yeah. Well, I the first part. So Robert Altman was really kind of my mentor on my first film, Omaha the movie, and his grandson Dana Altman is still one of my producing partners. And so, and Altman really, you know, inspired us to do kind of what he did with audio, which is every actor has their own individual mic, and which goes to a separate track. and he was really the first person to start doing that with MASH in Nashville. A lot more people do it now, and it's more common in TV and things like that. But what it does is it really, if you're doing it right, it encourages the actors to speak over each other, which is much more naturalistic, and you get much more lived in performances that kind of feel improvised, even if they're not improvised, even though they're still staying on script. And the actors can kind of surprise each other more, which is great. And it makes it harder to edit and to do sound design, but you get much better performances. And it also means you don't have to do ADR later, which is really important just on a budgetary reason, but also for performance wise. You never have to, because there's always someone's microphone that's going to pick it up, plus you have a boom. Anyway, so that was kind of that side of it. But I think as a central relationship, I mean, I always pitched this film initially, even when we were writing it, as 3 Days of the Condor meets Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, but a little funnier than either of those. And that was kind of the Virginia Woolfy, core of the middle of the movie. But I did want to play with the kind of the cultural things that were going on in 1974. On the one hand, you had this World War II generation that were still middle-aged, and how were they dealing with everything? You had the kind of the end of the hippie era, but it was before the disco era of the 70s. Meanwhile, you had the tail end of the Vietnam War, and how did that affect people in different ways, and not all, exactly the same way. And people's ambivalence about Nixon. I mean, people forget he won election twice. Like, there was a base of support for Nixon until there wasn't, with Watergate. And so how did that change manifest itself, especially for someone that we were working for him? So playing with those kind of cultural clashes was a lot of fun for me, and something that I wanted to dive into, and pay homage to that World War II generation without making a World War II movie, and talk about Vietnam without making a Vietnam movie.
Yeah, exactly. And then, I mean, just to finish up, we're running out of time. Now, typically, if we go to the movies, there's always kind of an end credits prologue or whatever, to bring you back to the cinema in a couple of years' time. But you've done something very different. I think you wrote a song on, I don't know if it's one song or two songs in the end credits that kind of elaborate on certain things that you talk about in the film now that people should stay and watch, that maybe they don't realize that they should do now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, and that was a lot of fun. I mean, part of it was we had time during this break, but with the pandemic, we had 6 months gap, and so Luis Guerra, who's a brilliant composer, and I wrote the lyrics, he wrote the music, and we came up with these songs because I'm a big believer in original music for films, so you may as well make them relevant to the film itself and explore the themes of, so we have a song called Wonder Bread and another song called Baked and Toasted, and Brasilia Bella was written just for the film itself, which is really kind of Connie's theme song. So yeah, we just wanted to have fun with it and explore those things. So yeah, stick around for the end credits for sure.
Exactly. But well, listen, we're out of time, Dan. So it's a pleasure to speak to you again. Thanks very much for helping me out with these interviews, and I can't wait for people to see it, and I can't wait to speak to you again about something else sometime soon.
Absolutely, Howard. All right, stay in touch, man.
All the very best.
It'll soon be over.
Tomorrow, 30 years from now, I want to be remembered, Bob.
You will, sir.
You will.
Well, that's no good, Al.